The FBI has released new footage showing the suspected shooter wanted over the killing of Charlie Kirk at that speaking event. Is it unusual that the shooter hasn't been identified yet?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, it depends on the person. A lot of times you have mentally disturbed people who aren't actually thinking very well and are pretty easy to get caught. Sometimes you have really good survivalists who get out in the wilderness and are very hard to track down. And we just don't know enough about the person to sit here and sort of armchair guess. On the other hand, there are some very serious concerns raised. There was a big story in the Times today, which I think was justified, talking about the very inexperienced people that Donald Trump has put in running the FBI right now. They tend to act a little bit like high schoolers. There's a lot of infighting and firings and rehirings and things like that. So we'll have to see if this is the gang that can't shoot straight or whether they can get their act together and find the person who did this absolutely terrible, horrific act.
That's interesting. So there is a fear that, in fact, you know, there isn't the expertise to try to nail this down.
Yes, and honestly, I suggest people check out this New York Times story because it is very detailed. It's about how they've gone through and they've sort of, it seems like they're targeting women and people of color and saying, you're the special agent in charge in Utah and you're very well respected, but we're still going to throw you out of the position. And then all of a sudden they have a terrible shooting like this in Utah and they don't have, you know, the experienced person with a lot of who's done things like this a lot in the past. You've seen the two FBI directors come out there and, you know, stand up at a press conference and not say very much. And there's a lot of other detail like that. So it's not my own knowledge. On the other hand, it is definitely true to say that the two top people in the FBI, Dan Bongino and Kash Patel, are not let's just say they're not of the mold of the traditional FBI director, who are very, very serious and very well respected men. Another interesting thing is, you know, the right has always been attacking the FBI for the last 10 years. FBI directors have always been Republicans. They've always been very serious people. And now we have people who are sort of, it seems like they're tertiary level. But again, we have to let time go on and see who they can find.
Vice President J.D. Vance escorted Charlie Kirk's coffin onto Air Force Two from Salt Lake City to Phoenix. What is the significance of this shooting for the Trump administration?
Well, this is what I said in my column at the end of it, that I think we're going to see a very bad time in America. We should have a president who brings people together, calms emotions and things like that. We have exactly the opposite. This is also an administration that takes advantages of things and anything they can to sort of distract attention from the very real problems facing the country. You don't see these people do much about kids that are killed in school shootings, Jews that are shot in churches, all these other horrific gun crimes we see in America quite often. But here's one of their own, and they feel they can use it to rile up their base. And again, there's genuine sorrow here. It's a terrible thing. It's terrible for his wife. It's heartbreaking for his kids. He's actually friends with a lot of people in the Trump administration. He's close to Trump himself. So I understand the personal anguish. But I think, and what we're already seeing, is people jumping to conclusions. Donald Trump himself just said something today, something like, we need to beat the hell out of these radical leftists. Nobody knows who did this or what happened. And it's very inappropriate for someone who's actually at the top of the crime investigating part of the administration to be saying things like that.
Yeah, and there have been other columns written that I've read a lot on this topic, as I'm sure you have, because it's just such a disturbing story and the aftermath of it. But some people's argument that the left has become too intolerant and this is the consequence. What's your view of that framing?
Boy, okay. So I have to confess, I come from the left. I was in the alternative press. I worked at Salon, what we call the alternative press. I worked at National Public Radio, which is a very mainstream operation like the ABC, but is often attacked as being part of the left. So I'll take that mantle for right now. And there are definitely people on the left who, as we said when I was at university, were politically correct, and now the word is woke and stuff like this. But the left tends to ridicule those people. There are people on both sides who say stupid things, but I really, honestly, speaking as a journalist, I think it's incontrovertible that the rhetoric from the right and the status of the people on the right who promulgate this rhetoric is of a completely different level than on the left. You can always find people on social media who have 12 followers saying dumb things or making more jokes or saying really awful things they shouldn't say. But the people we see on the right are people like Charlie Kirk himself, Don Jr., the president's son, J.D. Vance. There's all sorts of people in very high positions of power who say terrible things about violence, who promulgate violence themselves, who demonize gay people, trans people, people of color, Muslims, you name it. Okay, so I think that the increase in violence comes from the president on down. If Barack Obama said some of the things that Donald Trump says, Fox would still be talking about it. If one of Barack Obama's daughters said something about a crime victim of the sorts of things that Don Jr. routinely says, we wouldn't hear the end of it. So in my really honest professional estimation, I mean, there's a lot more violent rhetoric coming from the right than the left. That's not to say there isn't on the left.
Yeah, because there is, look, I mean, I can't fact check that or qualify that, but there is an intolerance from some parts of the left. We don't know who the perpetrator is. That's a separate issue. But in terms of speech and tolerance, there has been a sort of tendency towards shutting down speech.
Oh, absolutely. No, you totally see that in academia and in certain other places. And it's incredibly silly sometimes. And these people generally aren't in actual positions of power. Believe me, I'm from that world and I've seen it from now and again. To my mind, it's relatively innocuous compared to the president himself, espousing violence, which is just something on a much different level. I think you have to agree.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me.